The sky was on fire. Not metaphorically. Actually burning. Orbital defense platforms that had protected Iller Prime for 3 generations were breaking apart in streaks of molten debris, carving incandescent scars through the upper atmosphere as they fell. 200 warships had stood between the planet and annihilation. 200. They lasted 11 minutes. The first wave from the Corthal Dominion had shattered the outer picket line with focused gravitational shear weapons, bending hulls inward like crushed tin. The second wave disabled shield harmonics across the remaining fleet before captains even understood what was happening. By minute 9, fleet command was gone. By minute 11, space belonged to the enemy. Now the bombardment had shifted from orbital assets to the planet itself. Cities were not targeted directly. That would have been mercy. Instead, the Corthal altered the atmosphere. High-altitude dispersal drones spread chemical catalysts into the upper layers, destabilizing nitrogen balance. Oxygen content dropped fraction by fraction. Invisible. Slow. Precise. Within hours, breathable air would become poison. Within days, ecosystems would collapse. Genocide by chemistry. Inside the planetary capital, emergency sirens pulsed in exhausted cycles. Governor Talron stood before the shattered viewport of the assembly tower, watching streaks of fire cross the horizon. The evacuation fleets had already launched. They were intercepted. Allied systems had been contacted. Responses returned within minutes. Regretfully, we cannot engage Corthal forces at this time. Our fleets are committed elsewhere. Strategic neutrality must be maintained. One message was more honest. We cannot win. Talron closed the channel. Below, the streets were orderly. No riots. Just quiet panic. Families sealing their homes. Hospitals switching to reserve oxygen. Children asking questions no one could answer. Military advisors surrounded the governor with tactical projections. Projected survival time, 18 hours. Best case resistance scenario, 22. No reinforcements detected within 3 jump radii. The Corthal flagship loomed in high orbit, a jagged mass of armored spines and energy conduits stretching nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern. It did not hurry. It did not taunt. It simply executed a planetary death sentence with bureaucratic efficiency. A transmission arrived from the Dominion commander. Surrender is acknowledged but irrelevant. Atmospheric correction will continue. Correction. Talron's hands trembled once before he steadied them against the console. Any independent contractors? Private defense fleets? He demanded. His chief strategist shook her head slowly. They won't challenge the Dominion. The planetary defense grid attempted one last counterstrike. Surface-based rail cannons fired in synchronized sequence. Every shot was intercepted. Orbital superiority was absolute. Talron opened a final emergency broadcast across open channels. To any vessel within range, he said, voice cracking despite discipline. Iller Prime faces extinction-level assault. We request immediate intervention. Static answered. In orbit, dispersal drones released another wave of atmospheric destabilizers. Air quality monitors dipped again. Children began coughing. Talron's shoulders sagged as the reality settled fully. 200 warships had not been enough. Allies had calculated and withdrawn. The Dominion had already won. He whispered it before he realized he had spoken aloud. There must be someone. The emergency council chamber beneath Assembly Tower had thinned. Half the advisors were coordinating evacuation routes that no longer functioned. The other half were staring at the tactical projection as if sheer concentration might conjure a miracle. It didn't. Corthal dispersal patterns widened. Atmospheric oxygen dropped another 0.3%. Governor Talron rubbed a hand over his face. Run the registry again, he said quietly. Independent powers. Fringe states. Anyone not bound by Dominion fear. His chief strategist hesitated. There is one. The room shifted. Talron looked up. Say it. She inhaled slowly. Earth. Silence. Not hopeful silence. Uncertain silence. The humans, one defense minister scoffed. They are barely 2 centuries into interstellar expansion. They're politically isolated, another added. They refused Dominion trade compliance 3 cycles ago. Half the council considers them destabilizing. Destabilizing, the strategist repeated softly, bringing up a new dataset. Human fleet doctrine summaries filled the holographic field. Compact formations. Unconventional engagement vectors. Close-range kinetic prioritization. Zero surrender history. They're unpredictable, she said. They reject proportional response models. They escalate until resistance collapses. Talron frowned. That sounds like desperation, not strategy. It works, she replied. A junior intelligence officer spoke from the back. They lost an entire strike group in the MYRR conflict and responded by collapsing a star's orbital infrastructure around the enemy fleet. That was exaggerated propaganda, someone snapped. It was verified, the officer said quietly. They used controlled solar mass drivers. It ended the war in 8 minutes. The chamber grew colder. Another advisor shook his head. They are unstable. Their captains have a reputation for ignoring retreat protocols. They ram ships when out of ammunition, the intelligence officer added. That silenced the room completely. Intentionally? Talron asked. Yes. A new projection displayed footage, grainy, distant, of a human cruiser accelerating beyond safe structural tolerances and driving itself through a superior warship's core. Both vessels had detonated. The human fleet had advanced through the debris without slowing. They consider loss acceptable if objective is achieved, the strategist said. That's madness, a counselor whispered. It's deterrence, she corrected. Talron studied the atmospheric decline indicator hovering in the corner of the chamber. 17 hours. Have they ever engaged the Corthal directly? He asked. No, she admitted. The Dominion avoids them. Trade routes reroute around human space. Why? A beat. They do not behave predictably. Dominion doctrine relies on controlled escalation. Humans do not escalate in stages. They detonate. Another transmission from orbit interrupted. Oxygen down another 0.4%. Hospitals reporting increased respiratory failure. Talron looked back at the human fleet summary. Young species. Politically isolated. Reputation. Volatile. War doctrine classified as brutal. Unpredictable. No confirmed surrender record. He exhaled slowly. We send the request. A counselor leaned forward urgently. If they answer, Governor, the Dominion may retaliate against us even more severely. Talron's eyes hardened. We are already facing extinction. The strategist initiated the emergency broadcast. Distress call transmitting to Sol. The signal leapt into the dark. For a long moment, nothing happened. In orbit, Corthal dispersal drones continued their quiet work. Talron stared at the tactical display. 200 warships had not been enough. Perhaps discipline and caution were overrated. He whispered it almost to himself. Unhinged might be exactly what we need. The reply came faster than expected. 43 minutes after the distress signal left Iller Prime, the chamber lights flickered as a secure channel forced priority override across every communication array. The projection stabilized. A human appeared. Mid-50s. Dark uniform. No medals. No ornamental insignia beyond a simple rank band at the collar. Behind her was not a parade deck. Not a ceremonial command hall. A combat operations center. Dim lighting. Tactical displays suspended in layered holographic grids. Officers moving with efficient silence. Governor Talron straightened instinctively. I am Governor Talron of Iller Prime, he began. Our planet is under. I see it, the human interrupted gently. Her eyes flicked once to the side, clearly reading live data feeds. On the shared projection, Corthal fleet formations were already mapped. Atmospheric degradation rates calculated. Projected casualty curves displayed. The human did not react. I am Admiral Naomi Ward, Terran Expeditionary Command, she said. Her voice was steady. Measured. How many ships do you have available? Talron asked, unable to mask urgency. Ward tilted her head slightly. "How many do you need?" The question caught the chamber off guard. Talron swallowed. "They field over 300 capital-class vessels." Ward nodded once. "And your defense is compromised?" "Yes." Another officer stepped into frame behind Ward, murmured something quietly. She listened, then looked back at Talron. "You understand," she said calmly, "that engaging the Corthal Dominion will escalate beyond this system." Talron did not hesitate. "We will not survive regardless." Ward studied him for a moment. "Not judging. Assessing." "You said send anything," she said. Talron blinked. "Yes." Ward gave a short nod. "Very well." She turned slightly away from the camera. "Operations," she said evenly. "Activate spear point." There was no rush in her voice. No dramatic flourish. Displays shifted behind her. One cluster of lights separated from a larger formation map labeled Soil Perimeter Defense. A single marker brightened. Talron leaned forward. "You're sending one ship," a counselor blurted. Ward glanced back at them. "Yes." Silence flooded the chamber. "One vessel cannot break 300, Talron said carefully. Ward's expression did not change. "It won't need to." Behind her, a tactical officer announced, "Drive core spooling. Warp envelope forming." Ward faced the camera fully again. "You should begin civilian shelter consolidation in hardened zones. Minimize surface exposure." "You're certain?" Talron pressed. Ward nodded once. "We'll be there." The transmission ended cleanly. No anthem. No promise of vengeance. Just confirmation. In the vacuum near Sol's outer defense ring, a massive hull separated from formation. Its silhouette was long and narrow, armored spine running the length of its body like a drawn blade. Engines ignited without spectacle. Space folded. And the ship vanished. Back in orbit over Iller Prime, the Corthal Dominion continued their atmospheric alteration protocol. They did not know something was already on its way. Not a fleet. Not an armada. Just one. The Corthal Dominion did not frighten easily. Their fleets were engineered for inevitability, layered shields, adaptive hull plating, overwhelming numerical doctrine. Their command ships were cities of war suspended in vacuum. But 12 minutes after Admiral Ward's transmission ended, something interrupted their certainty. A gravitational fluctuation rippled across the outer perimeter of Iller Prime system. Not a standard warp signature. Not a known jump corridor emergence. It was heavier. Deeper. Sensors aboard the Dominion flagship recalibrated automatically. "Mass anomaly detected," a tactical officer reported. The Corthal commander leaned forward in mild irritation. "Magnitude." The officer hesitated. "Readings are inconsistent." "Clarify." "Gravitational displacement suggests." The screen flickered. Recalculated. Then froze. "Capital mass equivalent to a planetary defense platform." Silence settled over the command bridge. "That is impossible," the commander said flatly. The sensor officer swallowed. "No species builds ships that large." Another distortion tore across local space. Not an explosion, not an energy flare. Space itself bent inward, stretched thin like fabric under tension. Then it ruptured. Not violently. Deliberately. A seam of darkness split open between stars. From it, something emerged. Slowly. Deliberately. The first visible structure was not an engine flare or shield shimmer. It was armor. Layered plates, thick as city blocks, interlocked in brutal geometry. No flowing curves. No aesthetic symmetry. Just angled slabs designed to deflect, absorb, endure. Then came the spine, a reinforced central structure bristling with weapon arrays embedded directly into the hull rather than mounted externally. The engines followed. 6 massive fusion drives housed within armored recesses, glowing not bright but dense, white cores restrained behind containment fields that hummed even across vacuum. The vessel completed its emergence with methodical inevitability. Length: 7 kilometers. Mass: beyond conventional classification. Hull configuration: asymmetric, reinforced, functional. It did not resemble a ship. It resembled a fortress that had decided to move. Iller Prime's orbital sensors struggled to process it. The Korthal fleet did worse. Targeting computers attempted lock acquisition. Failed. The hull geometry disrupted standard solution algorithms. Too many angles. Too much layered mass. It carried no decorative markings. No polished insignia. Only a single designation burned faintly into the forward armor plating. TS Aegis Resolve. The human flagship did not announce itself. It did not request engagement. It did not threaten. It simply existed in the space between the Korthal Armada and the planet. A wall. Korthal formation commanders recalculated firing arcs. 300 ships shifted position to surround the intruder. The human vessel did not adjust. It did not maneuver to evade. It held position. Unmoved. Identify defensive rating, the Korthal commander ordered. Sensors struggled. Structural density exceeds known alloy classifications. Shield harmonics. Active. Layered. Non-standard frequency cycling. The commander studied the projection. One ship. Against 300. No elegance. No diplomacy. No hesitation. Just mass and intent. The commander finally spoke. Prepare full-spectrum assault. The human flagship did not respond. It did not need to. Because it had not come to survive. It had come to end something. The Korthal fired first. 300 warships unleashed synchronized volleys, plasma lances, antimatter bolts, gravitational shear pulses layered into a single overwhelming strike. Space lit white. The combined force would have gutted a moon. It hit the human flagship. And stopped. Not against a shimmering energy barrier. Not against visible shielding. The blast struck an invisible boundary and bent. Literally bent. Kinetic rounds curved off trajectory as if nudged by unseen hands. Plasma streams warped sideways, unraveling into harmless arcs that dissipated into vacuum. Gravitational pulses flattened, redirected, and folded outward into space like waves breaking against an unseen cliff. The Korthal tactical screens struggled to interpret it. No energy shield detected. Impact vectors altered. How? The answer appeared in fragmented data models. Localized space-time distortion fields. The human ship wasn't absorbing fire. It was rewriting how impact worked. The Aegis Resolve held position, unmoved. Then it returned fire. No barrage. No missile swarm. A single aperture opened along the vessel's armored spine, a segmented channel running nearly a kilometer along its dorsal surface. Internal mechanisms aligned. Containment rings rotated into sequence. On Korthal sensors, reality began to spike. A narrow region in front of the human flagship compressed. Starfield distortion intensified, collapsing inward toward a single fixed line extending from the aperture. Unknown weapon charge detected, a Korthal officer whispered. The commander felt something unfamiliar press against his certainty. Fear. The weapon fired. There was no beam in the conventional sense. No sustained blast. Just a lance of impossibly dense brilliance, a thin, white fracture slicing across vacuum. Where it passed, space momentarily inverted. The first Korthal cruiser in its path did not explode. It disappeared. Not destroyed. Removed. Hull, crew, reactor core, erased into a collapsing singularity that winked out a fraction of a second later. The lance continued. Through shields. Through layered armor. Through 3 additional warships in a perfectly straight line. Each one vanishing in identical, silent absence. The phenomenon lasted less than 2 seconds. Then it ended. The aperture sealed. Residual gravitational turbulence rippled outward where 4 capital ships had once been. No debris. No radiation cloud. Just empty coordinates. The Korthal formation faltered for the first time. Weapon systems paused mid-charge. Tactical overlays recalculated probabilities that no longer aligned with known physics. That was 1 discharge, a Korthal officer said, voice tight. The commander stared at the gap carved through his armada. 300 ships had opened fire. 1 had answered. And erased 4. The realization spread across the fleet in quiet, devastating clarity. They were not facing a stronger opponent. They were facing a superior one. The Korthal did what they had always done. They tightened formation. 300 warships shifted into layered defensive geometry, carriers shielded by cruisers, cruisers bracketed by escorts, fire lanes cleared with mathematical precision. Disciplined, predictable, beautiful in a clinical way. Their doctrine favored order. Clean vectors, coordinated volleys. War as architecture. Across from them, the Aegis Resolve did something far less elegant. Its ventral hangar bays opened. Not dramatically. Not ceremonially. They simply opened. Small signatures spilled outward, dozens, then hundreds of compact strike craft accelerating away from the flagship in irregular patterns. Korthal sensors locked onto them immediately. Human fighter deployment confirmed. Minimal tonnage. Negligible threat individually. The Korthal commander gave a sharp order. Interception grid. Flak fields ignited. Point defense arrays calculated firing solutions against incoming craft. The first human fighters didn't dodge. They vanished. Short-range microjumps, violent distortions no larger than a cruiser's hull, blinked the fighters out of their projected paths and reinserted them inside Korthal formation gaps. Too close. Too fast. A human fighter reappeared beneath a cruiser's shield curvature, released a kinetic charge at point-blank range, then jumped again before return fire converged. Another materialized above an escort's drive array, unloaded rail rounds directly into exhaust vents, then disappeared in a distortion flash. This wasn't formation warfare. It was hunting. Human strike craft did not fly in lines. They swarmed. They feinted. They dove through gaps that did not exist until the last second. The Korthal response was immediate but ineffective. Their targeting systems were built for trajectory prediction. Microjumps erased trajectories. Their formations were built on spacing and coverage. Humans ignored spacing. They invaded it. Recalibrate predictive models. Impossible. Jump intervals are random. Not random. Adaptive. Every time a Korthal vessel shifted shield frequencies, the humans adjusted insertion angles. Every time point defense density increased, fighters appeared from vectors the Korthal had deprioritized. Cruisers began losing engine clusters. Escorts spun out of formation after precise strikes to control nodes. Not catastrophic damage. Strategic damage. Korthal ships started colliding. Their disciplined geometry fractured as captains overcorrected against threats appearing and vanishing without warning. For the first time, Korthal voice channels filled with something unfamiliar. Not panic. Confusion. Their doctrine had no space for this. War was supposed to be clean. Ordered. Structured. The humans made it messy. Controlled chaos. Predatory movement. The Aegis Resolve remained stationary throughout, a silent anchor while its smaller vessels tore at the edges of the Dominion fleet like coordinated scavengers dismantling a carcass. The psychological shift came quietly. A Korthal cruiser broke formation without command authorization. Then another. Once cohesion fractured, recovery was nearly impossible. 300 ships had entered the system as a unified machine. Now they moved like startled prey, and the humans were inside their perimeter. The Korthal commander did not surrender. He reformed. Fragments of the once perfect armada pulled inward, abandoning damaged vessels and collapsing into a dense spherical formation around the flagship. Shield harmonics synchronized again, tighter, layered, reinforced through shared power routing. A final stand. Every remaining heavy weapon angled outward. Converge all fire on the human capital ship, the commander ordered. If we break the spine, the swarm dies. Across the void, the Aegis Resolve had not moved. Not once. Inside its command deck, Admiral Naomi Ward watched the Korthal fleet compress into the exact configuration her tactical models had predicted 20 minutes earlier. She exhaled once. Finally, she said quietly. Her weapons officer glanced up. Window open. Ward nodded. Execute. The human flagship's dorsal spine separated along segmented seams. Armor plates retracted inward, exposing a structure that had remained concealed until now, a ringed array running nearly the full length of the ship's central axis. Power signatures spiked. Not linearly. Exponentially. Corthal sensors screamed warnings. Energy accumulation exceeding prior weapon discharge. Vector locked across full formation. The Corthal commander understood too late. Break formation. The human weapon fired. It was not a beam. It was not a projectile. It was a wave. A collapsing surge of hyperdense gravitational compression that expanded outward in a widening cone. Where it passed, shield harmonics failed instantly, not overloaded, but overridden. Hull plating crumpled inward as localized gravity multiplied beyond structural tolerance. Cruisers folded. Carriers imploded along their central frames. Escorts snapped like brittle bone. The spherical Corthal formation collapsed in on itself in seconds. Ships dragged into mutual destruction as their own mass turned against them. No prolonged exchange. No dramatic duel. Just annihilation delivered with mathematical precision. Within 8 seconds, over 60% of the remaining Corthal fleet ceased to exist. The rest broke. Emergency warp signatures flared across space as surviving vessels abandoned the battlefield without coordination. No pursuit followed. Human fighters disengaged immediately, reforming around the flagship. The Aegis Resolve powered down its exposed array. The void settled. Debris drifted where a Dominion armada had once stood. Admiral Ward gave one final order. Transmit. A narrowband message shot across all Dominion military frequencies. No embellishment. No threat. Just 5 words. Do not provoke the humans. Then the human flagship turned slightly, positioning itself once more between Iller Prime and the fleeing remnants of the Corthal fleet. The battle was over. Not because the Dominion had fought bravely. Not because they had retreated strategically. But because they had been shown, conclusively, what one human ship could do. The sky above Iller Prime cleared slowly. Corthal dispersal drones drifted powerless, captured by localized EMP sweeps from human strike craft. Atmospheric destabilizers were neutralized one by one. Oxygen levels began their gradual return to equilibrium. On the surface, emergency shelters opened cautiously. People stepped outside to find the horizon no longer burning. In orbit, the Aegis Resolve remained motionless, a vast, angular silhouette against starlight. Around it, human fighters docked in disciplined silence. No victory parade. No triumphant broadcast. Just containment and restoration. Governor Talron stood once more before the assembly chamber viewport, watching debris fields shimmer in distant orbit. A secure channel opened. Admiral Naomi Ward appeared again, framed by the subdued glow of her command deck. The battlefield had already been archived behind her, no celebratory displays, no casualty tallies. Talron inclined his head deeply. "You saved us." Ward regarded him calmly. "You asked for help," she said. "Nothing more. No lecture about preparedness. No demand for allegiance. You will face political pressure," Talron admitted quietly. "The Dominion will remember this." Ward nodded. "So will the rest of the galaxy." Her gaze shifted briefly to an off-screen display, likely tracking the retreating Corthal remnants. "We are not here to conquer territory," she continued evenly, "nor to occupy your orbit." Human engineering vessels had already begun assisting with orbital stabilization, coordinating quietly with Iller defense officials. "You defended us with one ship," Talron said. "The Dominion brought 300. Ward's expression did not change. "We sent what was required." A pause settled between them, not awkward, not tense. Just understood. Talron hesitated before asking the question lingering across half the galaxy's communications networks. "Why build something like that?" Ward answered without pride. "Because there are things in this universe that only respect force." Behind her, the massive hull of the Aegis Resolve loomed, not menacing, not theatrical. Functional. Prepared. "We prefer peace," she said. Then her voice hardened slightly, not louder, just certain. "But we are the monsters that monsters fear." The channel closed. Within hours, Corthal diplomatic envoys began transmitting ceasefire requests across multiple systems. Trade routes recalibrated. Minor powers reconsidered their alliances. Iller Prime did not become a human protectorate. No flags were raised. No occupation fleets remained. The Aegis Resolve departed as quietly as it had arrived, folding space around itself and vanishing back toward Sol. But the balance of power had shifted. Not through conquest. Through demonstration. 200 warships had not been enough. One had been. And across the galaxy, empires recalculated what human truly meant.